I was planning to do another video where I try different aesthetics to figure out my own, but honestly, I kinda know. So a few months ago, I started testing out different aesthetics in the attempt to find one that I feel fits mine and helps me avoid buying stuff that I don't really use and just ends up living in my closet indefinitely. So upon starting this journey, I found a website that gives you a step-by-step guide to how to figure out what your aesthetic is. And in this video, I will try to use that list to determine which is mine. So step number 1 on that list is to determine what makes you unique. And by that, they say that you should try to figure out what kind of colors you like, what kind of activities you like to partake in, and so on. So I've done that, and I have made a chart, which I feel says a lot about my personality, where I have mapped out the stuff I like to do, what kind of personality I have, the colors that I like, the colors I don't like, what kind of stylistic preferences I have, and finally, different aesthetics I've been inspired by myself. And step number 2 on the list of finding your aesthetic is just that, to consider where you draw inspiration from. Now, step 3 was to look into your dirty clothes basket. And I get the theory in this, to sort of look at what you actually wear a lot. The thing is though, the clothes that I really like, I wash quite regularly, so they usually don't live in my dirty clothes basket for long. And also there are big seasonal shifts in Norway, resulting in some of the clothes that I love aren't necessarily used in summer and so on. So I'm kind of skipping this step for that reason. Step 4 is to base a decision upon earlier mentioned factors, and this is where my chart comes in. So I made a chart with my preferences, and I have made one with the different aesthetics that I've either tried or was planning to try. There are some aesthetics here that I haven't actually tried, but that I've looked into and kind of researched to figure out more about. I have tried to find inspirational photos for each aesthetic. I've tried to find color palettes for them, and I've tried to write down some keywords describing the different aesthetics. The first aesthetic is the art hoe aesthetic. So I have drawn green lines where there is a match between my preferences and the aesthetic, and I've drawn red lines where there is a mismatch. The art hoe with the more creative streak fits a lot of the stuff that I like to do. I've sort of described the art hoe aesthetic as more like social, kind of outgoing type of aesthetic. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that was my impression, which is not necessarily as fitting with me and my personality. There are some colors that I love that fit the art hoe aesthetic, and there aren't any clear mismatches. I have drawn a mismatch between the more simplistic, organized and serious style preferences and this aesthetic, just because it feels a bit more is more in a way. So overall, some good matches and some less. Now moving on to the dark academia aesthetic, and as you guys can see, there are a lot of lines here. In terms of personality and stuff I like to do, there are some matches and some mismatches. I like learning and reading and all that stuff. My love for being out in nature and more creative streak, I feel like could be a mismatch. In terms of colors that I love, there are a lot of matches. In terms of style preferences, there are a lot of keywords that check the box. And also when it comes to style inspirations, I feel like these also fit with the dark academia aesthetic. So as you guys can see, the dark academia one is a big match. Moving on to stealth wealth. Now this is one that I didn't test, but I have done a lot of research on it. So stealth wealth is more like an understated luxury, focusing on exuding power without like trying too hard to look rich. It's very understated and there's a lot of good tailoring involved. I've been watching Succession lately, so having Shiv was a given, and also Gwyneth Paltrow has been seen as a sort of beacon of this style aesthetic. So as you guys can see, it is a good match. A lot of the colors match. Style preferences have a lot of keywords matching this aesthetic, so it's tailored, it's classic, it has muted colors, natural materials, and I also feel like the style inspirations match, especially Gillian Anderson's character in The Fall. It's hard to kind of dress up in Style 12 because it's supposed to be muted, but that's a contender. When it comes to soft girl aesthetic, as you guys can see, there are some green lines here in terms of the more creative streak in my personality, and I have made that a match mostly because a lot of the makeup and such is a bit more playful and creative, but there are quite a few colors here that I'm not a big fan of. And in terms of style preferences, there are also quite a few mismatches. In terms of boho, this is a mixed bag. As you can see, I have a match with one of Gillian Anderson's outfits from Sex Education. I feel like this is also a style that matches my love for natural materials, loving nature and so on. And there are some colors that I love because it is more like a muted palette. My love for the more tailored autumnal vibe isn't necessarily here, but I can like this for summer. Now for the Visco Girl, this is also a mixed bag. It has some colors that match a bit, and the fact that it's a more sporty outdoorsy kind of fits with my hiking interests. But in terms of the style preferences, there are quite a few misses. Moving on to the cottage core, again, quite a few matches. My more nature-loving side, and also I would say to a certain degree the introverted side, kind of fits with this more like secluded cottage in the country vibe. The colors are a lot of matches, and there aren't any colors that I don't like. As I see this style, it is not the more simplistic style. Maybe it doesn't have to be, but that is something I have marked as a mismatch. But this is definitely up there. The twee aesthetic also have some green lines, as you guys can see. They're more creative, reading-oriented, tailored, classical, and also some of the colors match. My more serious and muted side, however, doesn't fit this more cute and quirky style. So those are kind of big factors for me. Finally, the 90s grunge. So as you guys can see, this, again, mixed bag, but these are more red than green lines. So this feels like a sort of creative, rebellious kind of movement, which could fit my creative side. It has some colors that match, but also quite a few colors that are not in my preference range. Less of like the classical and more of the rebellious, which doesn't necessarily match me. So overall, I would say that this has more mismatches than matches. So in total, I have just gone over and looked at the different aesthetics and done a sort of evaluation based on that. In third place is a tie between stealth wealth and boho. Second place is the cottagecore aesthetic, which checks a lot of the boxes. And for the first place, I don't think this is a big surprise, but first place is dark academia. This checks most of the boxes, really. A kind of like rich professor living in the country. I feel like a lot of people who do like sewing videos and stuff like that gravitate towards dark academia. A part of me was hoping to find something a bit more out of the box, but I'm not surprised. So to celebrate me finding my aesthetic, I thought that I would make a garment. So I have some garments in this aesthetic, but the one thing I'm really lacking is a skirt that's more on the tailored side, something in a wool quality. I found a vintage pattern for a skirt that I feel is very dark academia. I have a wool material that I really like to use for this. I've also bought some buttons that I feel fits this very well. So for the second half of this video, we'll be making a skirt. So what I've done is that I have made a mock-up. I'm gonna show you guys inside out. So this skirt, it has a broader waistband. It has buttonholes and shoulder straps. It also has pockets. I've not done that in this mock-up. It was just to see the size of it. I went for this dark brown wool flannel. So the buttons I have chosen are these. They sort of remind me of like heavy leather chairs in a library style office, which I feel is very dark academia. So I'm going to start cutting out the pieces. Now, the instructions I'm using do not call for a top stitch here, and in one way I like it the way it is without a top stitch, but at the same time I kind of feel like it would be easier if this part is like sewn down and not able to, you know, flap around. So I'm gonna try a top stitch anyway, and I'll just remove it if it doesn't work out. So this is what the front turned out like with the top stitch, and I really like the top stitch, so I'm gonna keep that. So on the left side I am going to sew the two pieces together up until the notch, which is where there will be a zipper. And for the other side I will sew together except for in between the red marks, because that's where the pockets will be inserted. And to think I almost forgot about the pockets. Right, so now it's time to match up the pocket pieces with the openings. So here we go. I'm just gonna sew this to this seam allowance with a centimeter seam allowance. So from there to there. I just realized I didn't overlock these pieces, but I don't want to take them back off. If you guys could hear how the cogs are working in my head right now. So I have sewn the first pocket, which is fine, it's working as it should and it looks nice. And then I was thinking, what about the other one? That one has also, as far as I can understand, also has a pocket in the other side, but that also has a zipper. And in the instructions, it's not really clear how exactly that is supposed to work. What I'm thinking is, if I'm going to have both the zipper and a pocket, I will need to place a zipper in between the pocket and that layer. So I could try to figure it out, or I could just have a zipper in one side and a pocket in the other. But I like having pockets and I've cut them. So I think I figured something out. So I looked at a tutorial for this and I'm gonna link that below if anyone wants to check that out for themselves. This is one pocket piece and this is the front edge. I have just pinned this pocket piece in place, and what I'm gonna do now is to sew a box here. So I'm just trimming away some of the fabric. I am going to top stitch the opening here. So this is now how the pocket looks. So this part, the opening, is effectively away from the seam allowance. There we have it. So now the back part of the pocket is essentially part of the seam allowance here. So here is a zipper, here is the pocket. So that worked out a lot better than I was scared it would. I am going to start working on the facing. I've just prepared the facing here. I need to make holes in these at the place where the opening is. So I'm gonna sew it on first, and then I'll deal with the holes afterwards. So you guys might see I have made a semi buttonhole thingy. I'm gonna try to just rip this open. It's time for the shoulder straps or suspenders or whatever you want to call them. So I've just cut strips of fabric, folded them in half, and I'm just going to sew around the top and one of the sides, turn it out, and then just double check the length and top stitch the whole thing. So that concludes my journey to find my aesthetic. I hope you guys have enjoyed this journey with me so far. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know. If you like this video, please leave a like below, that's super helpful, and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. I also have a link below to my Patreon where you can join a 1-tier membership so far just to support the channel. More will follow there, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.